Thanks, Ayaz. Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to the World Cricket Summit to pay tribute to the memory of Singh Dungarpur, a cricketing person with a very generous heart and a person who loved to help young cricketers. The man who was supposed to make this welcome, Mansur Ali Khan, the Nawab of Pataudi, better known not just to his mates but to everybody as the Tiger, unfortunately passed away a few months ago. It's a great honour and I deem it a privilege to pay tribute to Tiger, but it's also very sad. He died way too young and probably with still a lot to give not only to cricket but to life. Fortunately, first of all, when I arrived in India recently in September for the Champions League, I didn't even realise that Tiger was ill. And I got to Hyderabad and I picked up the paper and it said that he was in hospital. So I sent him a text saying that I hope he was better soon and look forward to catching up again. And unfortunately, later on that day, he died. Luckily, I did have the opportunity to catch up with him in March during the World Cup. Clive Lloyd and Tiger and myself, Tiger organised for us to meet in a hotel in Delhi, and we had a lovely couple of hours. And Tiger was his usual self, always charming, wouldn't say a lot, but when he did say something, it was memorable. And the thing that I remember it was almost the last thing he said as he was leaving. And I asked him about the family, and he said, one of my daughters is going to be an actor. She told me that she wanted to be an actor. And when I queried her becoming an actor, she said, well, if my brother can do it, I can do it. And then this cheeky little grin came on his face, a typical Tiger grin, and he said, well, actually, that's not how she said it. She said, if my brother can do it, I can bloody well do it. And I said, so what, she's your father's daughter, Tiger? And that basically was the last conversation we had together, but it was a nice memory. I think it's an indication of how, or the perception that administrators lack, that they didn't use Tiger's ability more as far as cricket was concerned. He had wonderful knowledge of the game and he had great ability to offer to the game of cricket. But I know that he did some work with IPL and he was used as a referee, but Tiger could have been used much more wisely in cricket if the administrators had been fair dinkum about finding out more from ex-players. As I said, it's sad that Tiger has gone so early. There were so many parts to Tiger. There was Tiger as a cricketer, and there was talk there about his innings in Melbourne. Well, I happened to be on the other side when he played that innings in Melbourne. He missed the first test in Adelaide because he'd pulled a hamstring, but the Indian batting was in such poor shape for the second test that he decided to play when he was far from fit. And as if one eye isn't a big enough handicap, and if you want to know how big a handicap it is, try closing one eye and trying to catch a cricket ball. It's not very easy. In addition to that, he had the pulled hamstring, and as if that wasn't enough challenge for him, he had to come out and face Graham McKenzie, who I think is one of the finest Australian fast bowlers we've had. And then you throw in the Melbourne weather, which was typical. It was overcast, it was drizzling on and off. In other words, conditions were very much in favour of the bowlers. And then just as an added challenge, Tiger came in when India were 5 for 25. So sitting on the good leg, which was his back leg, he just sort of got onto the back foot and he played everything from there. And there's two shots that will always stay in my mind. The first one, he hit Graham McKenzie straight back over his head, one bounce into the sight board at the MCG. I never ever saw anybody else treat Mackenzie like that. Mackenzie, as I said, was a very fine fast bowler. And when I say fast, I mean fast. Mackenzie could be pretty quick. The other shot that he played was off Dave Renneberg, who also could be quite quick. And Dave Renneberg pitched one around about leg stump, once again sitting on that back foot, and he went bang, and he hit it over mid-wicket, and it bounced once, and that was a much bigger boundary to mid-wicket. Bounced once, went over the fence. Those two shots will always stay with me from that innings. The other thing that I remember from that innings, as I said, it was drizzling on and off, so I think we were on and off the field about 5-6 times during the day. And each time, Tiger came out to bat with a different bat. And they were all Indian bats, and now, these days, Indian bats lead the world. But in those days, they didn't. They were basically copies of English bats, and they weren't so good. Anyhow, each time he came out with a different bat. That night after play, Barry Jarman took me into the Indian dressing room, and I met Tiger for the first time. And after I got to know him a little bit, I said to him, Tiger, you know, what was with all those different bats? And he said, Ian, I came on the tour, I had a sweater, a jumper, a pair of trousers, pair of socks, and boots and a jockstrap. He said, that's all I brought. I didn't bring any other gear. Imagine now, with all the gear they carry around, that's what Tiger came on a tour of Australia with. And he said, so I didn't have my own pads, my own gloves, or my own bat. So each time when we were going back out onto the field, he said, I just picked up the bat that was nearest the door and went out to bat with it. And doing that, he belted the Australian attack around and made 75 in the first innings, and just to prove it wasn't a fluke, he got 85 in the second innings. The other conversation we had that night, as I say, got to know him a little bit better, and I decided to find out a bit more about this man, Tiger Pataudi. So I said to him, Tiger, what do you do for a job? And he said, Ian, I'm a prince. You've got to understand, princes aren't a big thing in Australia, and I was pretty naive. And I said, but, you know, when you go to work, what do you do? And he just looked at me and he said, Ian, I'm a prince. I think my parents should have demanded a refund on my education because the message still didn't get through to me. And I said, yeah, but mate, you know, between 9 and 5, what do you do? He looked at me again, he said, Ian, I'm a fucking prince. He was obviously a very perceptive person. He realised that an Australian would understand terms like that. A few years later, or many years later, I was in India. It was when IPL was on, and Tiger was working with IPL on the governing committee. And I was doing some commentary with Ravi Shastri, and I heard Ravi on the phone talking, and I thought to myself, that sounds like he's talking IPL business with Tiger, you see. And I sort of gestured to Ravi. I said, is that Tiger? Yeah, he nodded. I said, give us the phone. So I got on the phone, I said, Tiger, that sounds awfully like a prince working to me. And we got a chuckle out of Tiger. As a captain, he was, and as an opponent who played against him, and you become, as an opponent, you become aware of the opposition captain and how difficult they make life for you as a batsman. And Tiger certainly made life very difficult. He had 3 terrific spinners in Erapali Pisana, Bishan Bedi, and Bhagwat Chandrasekhar. G'day Bish, how are you? Good to see you. He had 3 terrific spinners, but he used them very wisely. And as I say, he made life extremely difficult for opposing batsmen. He also wasn't a captain to be pushed around. And I discovered this, I came on the tour here in India in '69 as vice-captain to Bill Lawry. And we were playing the second test match in Kanpur on probably the flattest pitch that I've ever played a test match on. And by well into the fifth day, in fact there was probably only an hour and a half of the test match left, India was still only halfway through their second innings and we hadn't even had a second innings. So the match was going nowhere, we were all getting pretty bored and I was damn sick of being in the field. So I went over to Bill. I think it was the only advice I ever gave Bill as a captain. Well, certainly it was probably the only advice that he ever listened to anyhow. And I said, Bill, do you want to get off this field? And he said, yeah, I wouldn't mind, I've had enough of this. I said, well, why don't you bring yourself on and have a bowl? I mean, I was assuming a little bit because I'd never seen Bill Lawry bowl in the nets. I just assumed that he did bowl because all I'd ever seen him do in the nets was bat. Anyhow, he said, yeah, that's a good idea, I'll give it a try. So he came on and he bowled a pretty ordinary over and it worked. Tiger declared immediately and I thought, that's good, we've had a bit of success here. But I should have known better with this opposing captain. I didn't know him so well then, but I should have known better. India came out to field, and guess who opened the bowling? Tiger Pataudi. But he didn't just open the bowling, he measured out his run. To take the new ball, I suppose as a new ball bowler, you've got to have a long run. But this was ridiculous. Tiger went all the way back to the sightboard, and he pushed off the sightboard to bowl the first ball, just to get his message across. Hey, you ain't pushing me around. He bowled the one over and didn't bowl again, just to let us know I'm not going to be pushed around by you upstart Australians. And that's the sort of guy Tiger was. Everyone talked about him being a gentleman, and he was. But he wasn't a gentleman who could be pushed around. And as a captain, I remember we were in Delhi. I think it was, I can't remember, we were doing a tournament here. And we were at Abbas Ali Beg's house for a function. And it was back in the days when Mark Mascarenhas was doing a lot of television work. And Mark had this documentary put together, and it was about the 50 years of Indian Test cricket. And Mark said, I've got the video here, do you want to have a look? And I said, yeah, I'd be interested in having a look. And Tiger was there, and I said, come on, Tiger, come. No, I don't want to have a look at that, I don't want to see all that, Anyhow, eventually we got him to come in and have a look. So we're standing there watching it, and eventually it gets to Tiger's era and his time as a captain, and Raj Singh Dungarpur is actually interviewing Tiger, you see, and interviews him for a while, and then he says, Tiger, you were responsible for improving the standard of fielding in Indian cricket. And I've heard a lot of people say exactly that. And Tiger gave a typical answer. He said, yeah, he said, before me, he said all the batsmen used to go in, stand in the slips and drop all the catches. And I cracked up laughing. I thought that was a hilarious comment because normally they say, the batsman went into the slips and took all the catches. Not Tiger. He said they dropped all the catches. And I cracked up laughing, and Tiger sort of looked at me very seriously. He said, I'm being serious. I said, I know you're being serious, Tiger, but it was bloody funny. And I think there were a lot of times when Tiger didn't realise how funny he was. He just had that natural wit. He was also what I would call, or what Australians would call, a larrikin. A larrikin is a complimentary term. Sometimes Australians add to it a likeable larrikin or a lovable larrikin. And I think that's how I would class Tiger, a lovable larrikin. And probably the story that I could tell that best exemplifies him being a lovable larrikin was during the World Cup, 1996. Once again, it was Mark Mascarenhas. We were doing the television commentary for Mark. And we'd finished the semi-final in Chandigarh, where Australia had just beaten the West Indies in a very tight semi-final. And the final was to be played against Sri Lanka in Lahore. And they'd organised a charter flight for the Australian team and the media to go to Lahore. So we're all waiting for this charter flight. And I'm chatting in the terminal with Shane Warne and a couple of the other Australians, Ricky Ponting, and eventually we get the message that it's time to go. So we're walking across the tarmac, and Warney and I were deep in conversation about something or other. And we get up to the top of the stairs, get on the plane, and I see Ravi Shastri and Mark Mascarenas sitting in first class. And I know that we're all booked economy. You know, we've got the green strip on our boarding pass, which is economy, not the red strip. We've got the green strip. I see Mark and Ravi sitting in first class, and I immediately think, well, in India, if you want anything, you speak to Ravi Shastri because he'll get it fixed. But I'm thinking, what's he doing in first class? You see, and Mark, big bloke, Mark, he grabs hold of me and he says, sit down here, and he says, and bring Warney with you. I said, mate, I'm in economy, you know, I'm not in first class. He said, sit down. I said, what's going on? And he said, look, Ravi's found out that there are 20 seats in first class, but there are only 16 officials on the plane. So that means 4 spare seats. So we're in 2 of them. You and Warney get in the other 2. He said, there's no way in the wide world they're going to kick Warney out, so we'll be all right. And I'm saying, mate, you know, no, sit down. And Warney, poor old Warney's saying, oh, look, all the Australian team, they'll give me buggery if they come here and they see me sitting in first class. And he was right. As all the players, oh, Warney, you're in first class, are you? Oh, that's nice for you. We're up the back. So Tiger is sitting with Sharmila in the first row of economy, and he sees and hears this, you see, what's going on. And this gives you an idea of how perceptive, how quick the brain is, you see. Tiger sees Warney and I sit down, and he jumps up, and as I say, there's one administrator sitting in first class, the rest haven't boarded yet. And Tiger says, hey, Ayaz, give us a look at your boarding pass. So he hands over his boarding pass with the red strip on it, you see. Tiger looks at him with his boarding pass pretty close. He's looking at him here like that, you see. And then he goes, there you go. And he hands back the boarding pass, but he turns it over the other way, so you can't see the colour of the strip. Boom, like that. Gives it back to Ayaz, you see. And he plonks down next to Sharmila. 20 seconds later, Sharmila and Tiger are in first class. Tiger with a red boarding card. I thought to myself, that was quick thinking, and it was typical Tiger. Having also heard all the stories about the practical jokes that he played on his property, it didn't surprise me one little bit. But it's been, as I say, a great honour and a privilege to remember Tiger and to pay tribute to Tiger, who I looked upon as a tremendous competitor and a great opponent, an enjoyable opponent. I'll always think of him as an interesting and thoughtful character, and I always enjoyed his company. Appropriately, my favourite animal in life is the tiger, and he was also one of my favourite human beings. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.